Pain struck before awareness, a burning sensation that tore through her ribs like shattered glass. Evelyn woke on the damp forest floor, surrounded by pine trees that blocked out the sky, with no memory of how she had gotten there. When wolves emerged from the shadows and transformed into men before her eyes, she realized her ordinary human life was over. But what lay dormant in her blood would make her the most powerful among them all. The pain hit her before consciousness did, a burning sensation that clawed through her ribs like broken glass. Evelyn's eyes snapped open to find herself sprawled across damp earth, surrounded by towering pines that blocked out most of the sky. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she tried to piece together how she'd ended up here, but her mind offered nothing except a void where memories should have been. Her clothes hung in tatters around her body, the fabric shredded as if she'd been dragged through thorns for miles. But it was the wounds that made her stomach lurch with confusion. Deep scratches covered her arms and legs, yet even as she watched, the edges of the cuts seemed to be pulling together, healing at an impossible rate. She touched her face gingerly and felt tender skin where she was certain there had been gaping wounds moments before. The forest around her pulsed with an energy that made her skin crawl. Every rustle of leaves sounded amplified. Every snap of a twig echoed like gunfire in her enhanced hearing. She could smell things that shouldn't be possible to detect. The musk of animals, the metallic tang of blood, the sweet decay of fallen logs, all layered together in a symphony that overwhelmed her senses. Standing on unsteady legs, Evelyn tried to get her bearings. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction, their trunks so massive that 3 people couldn't wrap their arms around them. Moss hung like curtains from the branches, creating an otherworldly cathedral that felt both beautiful and threatening. She had no idea which way led to civilization, but staying here wasn't an option. She'd barely taken 10 steps when the growling started. It began as a low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the soles of her feet and up into her bones. Evelyn froze, her heart hammering against her ribs as she slowly turned in a circle, searching for the source. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift and writhe, and she realized with growing horror that what she'd taken for patches of darkness were actually moving shapes. They emerged from the forest like nightmares given form. Wolves, but not like any she'd ever seen in nature documentaries. These creatures stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, their coats ranging from silver to midnight black, their eyes glowing with an intelligence that was disturbingly human. There were at least a dozen of them, forming a perfect circle around her with the precision of trained soldiers. "This isn't possible," she whispered, but her voice sounded strange even to her own ears, deeper and more resonant than she remembered. The largest wolf, its coat a rich auburn that caught what little sunlight filtered through the canopy, stepped forward. Its golden eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, something flickered in that gaze, a recognition that sent ice through her veins. Then the air around the creature began to shimmer and bend. Evelyn's mind rebelled against what she was seeing, but she couldn't look away. The wolf's form stretched and twisted, bones cracking and reforming with sounds that made her stomach heave. Fur receded to reveal bronze skin, and within moments, where the wolf had stood, there was now a man. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with the kind of powerful build that spoke of a life spent in physical challenges. His hair was the same auburn as his wolf coat, falling in waves to his shoulders, and those impossible golden eyes remained unchanged. He wore simple clothes, dark pants and a loose shirt that couldn't disguise the predatory grace with which he moved. "You're trespassing," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "These lands are sacred to our kind. Humans are not welcome here." Around them, the other wolves began their own transformations, the air filling with the sounds of shifting bone and muscle. Men and women emerged from the changes, all carrying themselves with the same dangerous elegance as their leader. They formed a human circle now, but somehow that felt even more threatening than when they'd been in their wolf forms. "I don't know how I got here," Evelyn said, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the impossibility of the situation. "I just woke up and I was already here. I don't remember anything before that." The man's eyes narrowed, and she caught a flicker of something that might have been confusion before his expression hardened again. "Convenient. Do you take us for fools? No human stumbles into our territory by accident. These forests have protections older than your civilization." "I'm telling the truth," she insisted, and something in her tone made several of the others exchange glances. "I don't know who I am or where I came from. I just know I need to find my way home, wherever that is." "Your scent is wrong," said a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like winter storms. She stepped closer, inhaling deeply, her face twisting with distaste. "Human, but not human. There's something else mixed in, something that shouldn't exist." The leader held up a hand, silencing the woman, but his gaze never left Evelyn's face. She could see him studying her with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey, taking in details she wasn't even aware of displaying. When his eyes fixed on her healing wounds, something shifted in his expression. "Show me your hands," he commanded. Evelyn hesitated, then extended her palms. The scratches there were little more than pink lines now, fading even as he watched. His jaw tightened, and she saw his nostrils flare slightly as he scented the air around her. "Darius," the silver-haired woman said urgently, "you know what this means." So his name was Darius. It suited him somehow, carrying a weight that matched his presence, but the way she'd said it, and the way his entire body had gone rigid, suggested that whatever they were seeing in her was significant in ways she couldn't understand. "It's not possible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The bloodlines were eliminated centuries ago. The council made sure of that." "What bloodlines?" Evelyn demanded. "What are you talking about? What's wrong with me?" Darius stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the wild scent of him, pine and earth and something essentially masculine that made her pulse quicken in ways that frightened her. "Nothing is wrong with you," he said quietly, and for the first time she heard something other than hostility in his voice. "That's the problem." Before she could ask what he meant, a new sound cut through the forest. Howls, coming from multiple directions, but these weren't like the calls of the wolves around her. These were higher, more urgent, carrying a message that made every one of Darius's people tense immediately. "Hunters!" someone hissed. "Here?" "That's impossible," said another. Darius's head snapped up, his entire demeanor shifting from wary interrogation to lethal focus. "Marcus, take the others and scout the perimeter. Elena, get back to the settlement and warn the elders. Move now!" The circle dissolved as his people melted back into the forest with supernatural speed and silence. Within moments, only Darius remained, his golden eyes fixed on Evelyn with an expression she couldn't read. "You're coming with me," he said. "I don't think so," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. "You said I was trespassing. I'll just leave and we can pretend this never happened." "You don't understand." His voice carried a note of urgency that made her stomach clench. "If there really are hunters in these woods, you won't survive 5 minutes on your own. Human or not, whatever you are, you're in more danger than you realize." As if summoned by his words, the sharp crack of a rifle echoed through the trees, followed by an agonized howl that was cut short. Evelyn's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of running feet, heavy boots on forest floor, and the metallic click of weapons being readied. "They're closer than I thought," Darius muttered. "We need to move. Now." He started toward the deeper forest, then paused when he realized she wasn't following. "I'm trying to keep you alive," he said with barely controlled patience. "But if you'd prefer to explain to armed humans why you're wandering around a supernatural territory with accelerated healing abilities, Be my guest." The sound of another rifle shot, this one much closer, made the decision for her. Whatever these hunters were after, she had a sinking feeling she didn't want to find out what they'd do if they caught her. And despite everything that had happened, despite the impossibility of men who turned into wolves, she found herself trusting Darius more than the unknown threat bearing down on them. "Lead the way," she said. He nodded curtly and began moving through the forest with a fluid grace that made it clear this was his element. Evelyn followed, struggling to keep up despite her apparently enhanced physical abilities. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind them, and she could hear voices now, human voices calling out coordinates and directions. "How far?" she panted. "Not far," Darius replied without looking back. "There's a sanctuary ahead, protected by wards that should keep them out, but we need to reach it before they get a clear shot." They crested a small hill, and Evelyn caught her first glimpse of what lay ahead. Nestled in a valley between towering peaks was a settlement unlike anything she'd ever seen. Buildings made of stone and timber blended seamlessly with the natural landscape, their roofs covered in living moss and their walls carved with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Smoke rose from chimneys, and she could see people moving between the buildings, though at this distance they looked no different from any other small mountain community. "It's beautiful," she breathed. For the first time since their encounter began, Darius's expression softened slightly. "It's home," he said simply. "And if the elders have their way, it may be your home too, at least for a while." "What do you mean?" "You can't leave," he said, and the regret in his voice was unmistakable. "Not until we figure out what you are and whether you're a threat to our people. I'm sorry, but after what we've seen today, we can't take any chances." The word prisoner hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Evelyn felt a flash of anger at the presumption, but another rifle shot, this one close enough to send bark flying from a nearby tree, reminded her that her options were limited. "Fine," she said, "but I want answers. About what you are, about what I might be, about everything. You'll get them," Darius promised, and something in his tone suggested he was as eager for those answers as she was. "The elders will want to examine you, test you. It won't be pleasant, but it's necessary." They began their descent toward the settlement, and Evelyn tried to ignore the way her heart was racing, not just from the chase or the fear, but from something else entirely. Every time Darius looked at her, every time he spoke with that careful mix of authority and underlying gentleness, something inside her responded in ways she didn't understand. The rational part of her mind insisted this was all some kind of elaborate hallucination, that people didn't really turn into wolves, and settlements didn't hide in valleys protected by mystical wards. But the rest of her, the part that felt the truth in her accelerated healing and enhanced senses, knew better. Whatever she was walking into, whatever these people were going to discover about her, it was going to change everything. The life she couldn't remember was gone forever, and the future stretching ahead was filled with possibilities both terrifying and thrilling. As they reached the outskirts of the settlement, Darius paused and turned to face her fully. "Before we go any further," he said, "I need you to understand something. What happens next? The tests and questions and examinations, they're not just about you. If you really are what I think you might be, it changes everything for all of us." "What do you think I am?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but the words hit her like a physical blow. "I think you're something that was supposed to be extinct. Something that could either save us all or destroy everything we've built." His golden eyes met hers, and she saw hope and fear warring in their depths. "I think you're what the old prophecies called the Bridge Walker, the one who could unite the scattered packs or tear them apart trying." Before she could respond, before she could even process what he was saying, shouts erupted from the settlement ahead. People were running toward them, some in human form, others shifting fluidly between shapes. At their head was an elderly woman whose silver hair caught the light like spun moonbeams, her eyes sharp with ancient wisdom and barely concealed excitement. "Bring her to the council chamber," the woman called out. "The others are already gathering. If she truly carries the old blood, we don't have much time." "Time for what?" Evelyn asked, but no one answered. As they escorted her into the heart of the settlement, she caught glimpses of daily life that seemed both primitive and sophisticated. Children played in courtyards while their parents worked at trades she couldn't identify, their movements carrying the same predatory grace as Darius's people. The architecture was stunning, every building designed to harmonize with its surroundings while serving practical purposes she could only guess at. But it was the way people looked at her that made her breath catch. Hope, fear, suspicion, and something that might have been reverence warred in their expressions. Whatever they thought she was, whatever these prophecies meant, she was clearly more significant than she'd imagined. The council chamber turned out to be a circular building at the settlement's heart, its walls lined with tapestries depicting scenes of wolves and humans living in harmony. A dozen chairs arranged in a circle faced a single seat in the center, clearly meant for her. As she took her place, surrounded by faces that studied her with intense curiosity, one thought echoed through her mind with crystalline clarity. Her old life, whatever it had been, was truly over, but what lay ahead might be something extraordinary beyond her wildest dreams, if she was brave enough to embrace it. The elderly woman who had called for her capture now circled her chair like a predator evaluating prey. Her name was Lyra, and she carried herself with the authority of someone who had never been questioned. The other council members watched in tense silence as she examined Evelyn from every angle, occasionally pausing to inhale deeply or make soft humming sounds that meant nothing to anyone except herself. "Hold out your arm," Lyra commanded. Evelyn hesitated. "Why?" "Because I need to see how quickly you heal from a deliberate wound." The elder's voice brooked no argument. "The scratches you arrived with were random, chaotic. I need to see what happens with precision." Before Evelyn could protest, Lyra produced a silver blade that gleamed with an inner light. The metal itself seemed to hum with energy, and every wolf in the room shifted uncomfortably at its presence. Darius stepped forward, his jaw tight with disapproval. "Elder Lyra, perhaps we should start with less invasive tests." "Silence!" she snapped without looking at him. "This is beyond pack politics now, Darius. If she carries the bloodline, we need to know immediately. The signs in the forest suggest our enemies are already moving." The blade sliced across Evelyn's forearm before she could pull away, opening a clean cut that immediately began to bleed. The pain was sharp but brief, and she watched in fascination as the wound began to close almost instantly. But it was the gasps from the council members that made her look up. Every person in the room had gone perfectly still, their eyes fixed on her healing arm, with expressions ranging from awe to terror. The silver blade in Lyra's hand was smoking slightly, as if it had touched something it wasn't meant to encounter. "Impossible," whispered a younger man with scars covering half his face. "The silver should have slowed the healing, maybe stopped it entirely. Instead, it's accelerating." "Not impossible," Lyra said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made the air itself seem heavier. "Just forgotten. She doesn't just carry the old blood. She carries the pure strain, undiluted by centuries of mixing with lesser lines." "What does that mean?" Evelyn demanded, standing abruptly. The chair scraped against stone as she faced them all, her patience finally reaching its limit. "Stop talking about me like I'm not here. What bloodline? What prophecies? And why does everyone look like they've seen a ghost?" Darius moved to stand beside her, and she was surprised to feel comfort in his presence, despite everything that had happened. "The Bridgewalker bloodline was thought to be extinct," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "They were hybrids, born from unions between the first werewolves and beings of pure elemental power. The stories say they could command not just wolves, but all the supernatural creatures of the forest." "Stories," Evelyn said flatly. Not stories, Lyra corrected. History and prophecy. The last Bridgewalker died 300 years ago, but the ancient texts speak of one who would return in the time of greatest need. One who could either unite the scattered supernatural communities or destroy them all in the attempt. A new voice cut through the tension from the chamber's entrance. And that time has come sooner than we expected. Everyone turned to see Marcus, the scout Darius had sent to check the perimeter. His clothes were torn and bloody, and his left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Behind him limped two others, both in similar condition. Report, Darius commanded, immediately shifting into the role of pack leader. 12 hunters, maybe more. Military-grade equipment, silver ammunition, something I've never seen before that disrupts our ability to shift. Marcus's voice was strained with pain. They're not just hunting random wolves, Darius. They know exactly what they're looking for, and they're heading straight for the settlement. How long do we have? Maybe an hour. They're moving fast, but they're being careful to avoid our patrol routes. Someone's told them how we operate. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Evelyn saw the way every council member's expression hardened, the way suspicious glances were exchanged. If there was a traitor among them, it explained how hunters had found their supposedly secret territory. This changes everything, Lyra said grimly. We can't afford the luxury of a proper examination. If she is what we believe, we need to awaken her abilities now. The risks, Darius started, are irrelevant, the elder cut him off. The risks of doing nothing are greater. Marcus, how many of our people are still out there? Most of the hunting parties, maybe 40 adults, plus the children and elderly who stayed behind. If these hunters breach our defenses, he didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Evelyn looked around at their faces and saw not just fear, but a desperate hope that somehow rested on her shoulders. The weight of their expectations felt crushing. What exactly are you asking me to do? She said. Lyra stepped closer, her ancient eyes boring into Evelyn's with uncomfortable intensity. I'm asking you to trust us with your life. The awakening ritual is dangerous even under the best circumstances. Attempting it while under immediate threat could kill you. And if I refuse, then we all die anyway, Darius said quietly, but slower and with less dignity. Evelyn looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or manipulation. What she found instead was painful honesty. He wasn't trying to pressure her into anything. He was simply stating facts as he understood them. Tell me about this ritual, she said. Lyra exchanged glances with the other council members before nodding. The Bridgewalker bloodline is dormant until activated by extreme stress or specific rituals. The stress of your arrival and the hunters might have started the process, but we need to complete it deliberately. You'll need to drink a mixture of herbs that will lower your mental defenses, then allow us to guide your consciousness through a series of challenges designed to unlock your inherited abilities. What kind of challenges? We don't know, admitted the scarred man. Each Bridgewalker's trial is unique to them. You'll face whatever your bloodline considers your greatest obstacle to accepting your true nature. It sounded like elaborate mystical nonsense, but Evelyn's rapidly healing arm and enhanced senses suggested that mystical nonsense was apparently her new reality. How long does it take? Usually several hours, Lyra said. But we don't have several hours. We'll have to attempt an accelerated version and hope your natural abilities can compensate for the risks. Another explosion echoed through the valley, much closer this time. Through the chamber's windows, Evelyn could see smoke rising from the outer edges of the settlement. The hunters weren't waiting for her to make up her mind. If I do this, she said, and if it works, what then? What am I supposed to do with these abilities? Unite the packs, Darius said immediately. There are dozens of supernatural communities scattered across the mountains, most of them isolated and suspicious of each other. The hunters are picking us off one by one because we won't work together. A bridgewalker could change that. And if I can't, or if I don't want that responsibility? His golden eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her pulse quicken. Then we'll find another way. But right now, this is our best hope. The sound of rifle fire was getting closer. Through the enhanced hearing that still felt foreign to her, Evelyn could make out shouted commands and the crash of something heavy hitting the settlement's outer defenses. Whatever choice she was going to make, she needed to make it now. What do you need me to do? Lyra's relief was visible. Lie down in the center of the circle. The others will maintain a protective barrier while I guide you through the process. Darius, I'll need you to anchor her. What does that mean? Evelyn asked as she moved to the center of the chamber. It means if your mind gets lost during the trial, I'll be your way back, Darius explained, kneeling beside where she lay on the cold stone floor. It's dangerous for both of us, but it gives you the best chance of surviving with your sanity intact. She looked up at him, studying the strong lines of his face and the concern in his golden eyes. Why would you risk that for someone you barely know? His hand brushed against hers, warm and solid and reassuring. Because I don't think you're someone I barely know, he said quietly. There's something familiar about you, something that calls to my wolf in ways I don't understand. Maybe that's part of what you are, or maybe it's something else entirely. But I'm willing to find out. Before she could respond, Lyra was there with a cup filled with liquid that smelled like herbs and earth and something indefinably wild. Drink quickly, the elder instructed. The sooner we start, the sooner we can get you ready to face what's coming. Evelyn took the cup with hands that trembled only slightly. The mixture was bitter but not unpleasant, tasting of forests and ancient secrets. Almost immediately, she felt her consciousness begin to shift, the chamber around her becoming distant and dreamlike. Remember, Lyra's voice seemed to come from very far away. Whatever you see, whatever challenges you face, they're reflections of your own mind. The only way to fail is to give up. The world dissolved around her. She found herself standing in a place that was both familiar and impossible. It was the forest where she'd awakened, but different somehow. The trees were larger, older, their branches intertwining overhead to create a canopy so thick no light penetrated to the forest floor, yet she could see perfectly, as if the darkness itself was illuminated. In front of her stood 3 paths, each leading into deeper shadows. Above each path, symbols glowed with soft light. One showed a wolf running free under a full moon. Another displayed 2 hands clasped together, one human and one ending in claws. The third was a crown surrounded by stars. Choose, said a voice that might have been her own. She started toward the middle path, drawn by the symbolism of unity. But the ground beneath her feet shifted, and suddenly she was walking down the first path instead. The wolf path. The forest around her came alive with howls, dozens of voices calling to her in harmonies that made her soul ache with longing. She began to run, her human form feeling clumsy and slow compared to the creatures singing in the darkness. Her body started to change without her conscious decision, bones shifting and muscles flowing like water. But the transformation felt wrong, painful in ways that had nothing to do with the physical changes. She was losing herself, becoming something purely wild, with no connection to her human consciousness. In desperation, she fought against the change, forcing herself back into human form. The howling stopped. The path crumbled beneath her feet. She found herself back at the 3 paths, but now the wolf symbol was dark and cold. 2 choices remained. This time she chose deliberately, walking toward the crown surrounded by stars. Immediately, the forest around her transformed into a vast hall, filled with supernatural beings of every description. Werewolves, vampires, creatures she had no names for, all kneeling before a throne, where she sat wearing robes that felt like liquid starlight. "Command us," they said in unison. Unite us under your will. The power felt intoxicating, absolute authority over beings who could reshape the world according to her desires. But as she sat on that throne, she realized she was completely alone. The crown on her head was made of ice, and with every command she gave, it grew heavier and colder until she could barely lift her head. This wasn't unity, it was domination, and it was killing her as surely as it was controlling them. She tore the crown from her head and threw it to the floor, where it shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The hall dissolved, the kneeling figures faded, and once again she stood at the crossroads. Only one path remained, the one showing clasped hands. She walked toward it without hesitation this time, and the forest around her became something entirely new. She was still herself, completely human, but she could feel the presence of others with perfect clarity. Wolves ran alongside her, not as subjects or masters, but as equals. She could sense their thoughts and emotions, share their strength when needed, offer her own unique abilities in return. The connection flowed both ways, creating something stronger than any individual could achieve alone. This was what she was meant to be. Not wolf, not ruler, but bridge. The vision faded, and she opened her eyes to find herself back in the council chamber. But everything had changed. She could feel every person in the room as if they were extensions of herself, their emotions and intentions clear as daylight. The exhaustion of the ritual made her limbs feel like lead, but underneath that fatigue was a strength she'd never imagined possible. "How do you feel?" Darius asked, his voice tight with concern. "Different," she said, sitting up carefully. "More, like I've been living as half of myself my entire life." Lyra leaned forward eagerly. "Can you sense the others? The scattered packs in the mountains?" Evelyn closed her eyes and expanded her awareness outward. Points of light appeared in her mind's eye, some bright and strong, others flickering with fear or pain. "There are so many," she whispered, "and they're all afraid." "The hunters have been busy," Marcus said grimly. 3 settlements hit in the last week. Everyone's gone to ground, but that just makes them easier to pick off one at a time. "Not anymore," Evelyn said, opening her eyes. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. "I can reach them. I can show them how to work together." An explosion shook the building, close enough to rain dust from the ceiling. Through the windows, she could see muzzle flashes in the gathering dusk and hear the distinctive whine of silver bullets cutting through the air. "They're at the main gate," someone reported breathlessly from the doorway. "Darius, they're demanding we hand over the hybrid or they'll level the settlement." Darius's expression went hard as granite. "How many of our people are still out there?" "Most of the fighters are pinned down. The hunters have some kind of device that's interfering with our ability to coordinate. But if they get past our defenses..." Evelyn stood, testing her new abilities. She could feel every werewolf in the settlement, their locations and conditions clear in her mind. More importantly, she could sense their potential for working together in ways they'd never imagined. "They won't get past our defenses," she said quietly, "because we're not just defending anymore." The battle for the settlement began at sunset, but Evelyn felt it starting in her bones long before the first shot was fired. Her newly awakened abilities allowed her to sense every hunter's position, their heartbeats steady with the confidence of predators who had never faced truly coordinated prey. They had no idea what was about to hit them. "I need to get to higher ground," she told Darius as another explosion rocked the building. "I can coordinate our people, but I need to see the entire battlefield." "The bell tower," he said immediately, "but it's exposed. You'll be a target. Then make sure I'm not alone up there." He nodded, something shifting in his golden eyes that spoke of absolute trust. "Marcus, take 6 of our best and secure the tower. Elena, get word to every pack member still standing. We're about to try something that's never been done before." As they moved through the settlement, Evelyn marveled at how different everything looked through her enhanced perception. The buildings weren't just structures anymore. They were strategic positions, each one connected to the others in a web of defensive possibilities she could see as clearly as physical objects. The people running for cover weren't just individuals fleeing danger. They were potential nodes in a network of power that stretched far beyond this single battle. The bell tower stood at the settlement's heart, its stone walls carved with the same runic symbols she'd noticed on other buildings. As they climbed the narrow stairs, Darius explained what she was seeing. "Wards," he said, touching one of the glowing symbols. "They've protected us for centuries, but they're designed to hide us, not to enhance our abilities in battle. What you're planning to do, it's beyond anything they were created for. Then we'll have to be beyond anything they were created for too." They reached the top, just as the hunters breached the outer perimeter. Evelyn could see them clearly now, 12 figures in tactical gear moving with military precision through the settlement streets. But her enhanced senses revealed something else, something that made her blood run cold. "One of them isn't human," she said quietly. Darius followed her gaze to a figure hanging back from the main assault, seemingly human, but radiating a cold emptiness that her abilities recognized as fundamentally wrong. "Vampire," he confirmed grimly. "That's how they found us so easily. A creature of the night can track us in ways human technology never could. And the traitor? Probably doesn't even know they're being influenced. Vampire mind control is subtle when it wants to be." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The betrayal hadn't been willing. Someone in their community was being manipulated, their thoughts and actions guided by a predator who viewed werewolves as nothing more than prey, to be herded and slaughtered. "Can you identify who's being controlled?" Darius asked. Evelyn expanded her awareness, touching the mind of every werewolf in the settlement. Most blazed with fierce loyalty and determination, but one flickered with confusion and divided loyalties that felt like a wound in the fabric of the community. "Thomas," she said, identifying the young wolf who'd been part of Marcus's scouting party. "He doesn't even realize what's happening to him." "We can deal with that later," Darius said as rifle fire erupted from 3 different positions. "Right now, we need to focus on survival." Evelyn closed her eyes and reached out with her newfound abilities, connecting with every werewolf in the settlement simultaneously. The sensation was overwhelming at first. Dozens of individual consciousnesses suddenly accessible to her, their emotions and intentions flowing through her awareness like a river of liquid fire. "Trust me," she whispered. And somehow every person she was connected to heard her clearly, despite the chaos around them. What happened next defied everything the hunters thought they knew about werewolf behavior. Instead of the panicked, disorganized resistance they expected, the settlement's defenders began moving with perfect coordination. Wolves appeared from positions the hunters hadn't even known existed, attacking in perfectly timed waves that left no opportunity for counterattack. When one group engaged the enemy, another was already moving to flank them. When the hunters tried to fall back to regroup, they found their escape routes blocked by creatures who had anticipated their movements with supernatural precision. Through her connection to the network, Evelyn could feel the exhilaration of her people as they experienced true pack coordination for the first time. They weren't just individual fighters anymore. They were parts of a single, incredibly deadly organism with a collective intelligence that made them nearly unstoppable. But the vampire had noticed what was happening, and he was adapting faster than she'd hoped. "He's pulling back," she told Darius, watching the cold figure retreat toward the settlement's edge. "He's going to call for reinforcements." "How many more hunters are out there?" "I don't know, but if they have vehicles and heavy weapons..." She didn't need to finish. The settlement's defenses were designed to repel small groups, not military-scale assaults. "We need to end this now," Darius said, "before he can bring back an army." Evelyn reached out through her connection to the network, but instead of focusing on the werewolves in the settlement, she expanded her awareness as far as it would go. The sensation was like stretching a muscle she'd never used before. But gradually, she began to sense other points of light in the darkness. Other packs scattered throughout the mountains, all of them aware of the danger, but isolated and afraid. "I can reach them," she said, wonder in her voice. "The other communities, they're all connected to the same web of power that flows through this place." "The ancient bloodlines," Darius breathed. "The Bridgewalkers created the network originally, didn't they? That's why you can access it so naturally." She nodded, understanding flooding through her. Her ancestors hadn't just been powerful hybrids. They'd been the architects of a communication and coordination system that linked every supernatural community in the region. The network had been dormant for centuries, waiting for someone with the right bloodline to activate it again. "I need you to do something for me," she said, turning to face him fully. "I need you to trust me completely, even if what I'm about to do seems impossible." His golden eyes searched her face, and she saw the moment when he made his choice. "What do you need?" "I need you to anchor me to this place while I reach out to the other packs. If I go too deep into the network, I might not be able to find my way back." It was more dangerous than she was letting on. The ritual earlier had awakened her abilities, but using them at this scale without proper training was like trying to redirect a river with her bare hands. She could easily be swept away by the current of collective consciousness, losing herself in the vast web of interconnected minds. But as Darius took her hands in his warmth grounding her to her physical body, she felt a different kind of strength flow between them. Not just the pack bond she'd been using to coordinate the settlement's defenders, but something deeper and more personal. Something that felt like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been but had always belonged. "Whatever you're about to do," he said quietly, "know that I'll be here when you come back." She squeezed his hands once, then let her consciousness expand beyond anything she'd attempted before. The sensation was like flying and drowning simultaneously. Her awareness shot out across the mountains, touching dozens of supernatural communities that had been hidden for centuries. She felt their surprise, their fear, their desperate hope as they realized someone was reaching out to them with power they'd thought was lost forever. But she also felt something else, a vast, cold intelligence that had been hunting the scattered communities for years, learning their weaknesses and systematically destroying them one by one. The vampire in the settlement wasn't acting alone. He was part of something much larger and more organized than any of them had realized. The knowledge hit her like a physical blow. There wasn't just one group of hunters. There were dozens, all coordinated by an ancient vampire who viewed the supernatural communities as threats to be eliminated. They'd been playing a long game, isolating the packs from each other before moving in for systematic destruction. But they hadn't counted on a Bridgewalker awakening. Through the network, Evelyn reached out to every pack, every coven, every supernatural community within 100 miles. She showed them what she was seeing, shared the knowledge of the coordinated threat, and offered them something they hadn't had in centuries, the ability to work together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Werewolf packs that hadn't spoken to each other in decades suddenly found themselves able to coordinate their movements. Vampire covens that had maintained careful neutrality realized they were on the hunter's target list too. Even the more reclusive supernatural beings, the forest spirits, the mountain witches, the ancient things that preferred to avoid contact with anyone, recognized that this threat required unprecedented cooperation. What the lead vampire had intended as the final assault on an isolated settlement became something entirely different. The awakening of a supernatural alliance that spanned the entire mountain region. But using the network at this scale was burning through Evelyn's energy faster than she'd anticipated. She could feel her physical body growing weak, her connection to the present moment starting to fray. The temptation to let go, to merge completely with the vast collective consciousness she was accessing, grew stronger with every passing moment. That's when she felt Darius's presence like an anchor in a storm. His mind touched hers through their personal connection. Distinct from the broader network, she felt his strength, his determination, his absolute faith that she could handle whatever she'd taken on. But more than that, she felt something else flowing between them, an emotion so strong and pure, it cut through the chaos of collective consciousness like a blade of light. Love, not the desperate attraction of the past few days, but something deeper and more permanent. Something that recognized her not as the bridge walker or the hybrid or the key to ancient prophecies, but simply as herself, the person she was beneath all the supernatural abilities and mystical significance. The feeling was so powerful, it shocked her back to full awareness of her physical body. She opened her eyes to find herself still in the bell tower, still holding Darius's hands, but the battle around them had changed completely. Where there had been 12 hunters, there were now over 100 supernatural defenders converging on the settlement from every direction. Werewolf packs ran alongside vampire covens, their ancient enmities set aside in the face of a common threat. Witches rode the wind itself, their magic crackling through the air like visible lightning. Creatures she couldn't even name emerged from the deep forests, answering a call that hadn't been sounded in centuries. The hunters' confidence evaporated as they realized they were no longer facing a small, isolated community. They were facing an entire region's worth of supernatural beings working in perfect coordination. The vampire lord leading them tried to retreat, but he found his path blocked by creatures that had materialized out of thin air. Ancient things with too many teeth and eyes like stars, beings that remembered when vampires were young and still feared the older powers that ruled the deep places of the earth. "Surrender," Evelyn called out, her voice somehow carrying clearly over the sounds of battle. "Leave this place and never return, and we'll let you live." The vampire's laugh was like breaking glass. "You think this changes anything, little hybrid? You've only delayed the inevitable. There are powers in the world far greater than your mountain alliance. When they learn what you've awakened here, then they'll learn that we're not hiding anymore," she replied. "And we're not afraid." The vampire's expression shifted from arrogance to something approaching uncertainty. He looked around at the supernatural army surrounding him, at the perfect coordination of forces that should have been natural enemies, at the sheer impossibility of what he was witnessing. "This isn't over," he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," Evelyn said quietly. "The old way of doing things, the isolation and fear and picking us off one by one, that's over. We're connected now, all of us. And we're not going back to being prey." The vampire and his remaining hunters melted away into the darkness, but Evelyn knew they wouldn't be back. Not to this settlement, not with the same tactics, not with the same assumptions about how supernatural communities operated. As the immediate threat faded, she gradually let her awareness contract from the vast network back to her own body and immediate surroundings. The process left her dizzy and exhausted, but also exhilarated in ways she couldn't fully express. "How do you feel?" Darius asked, his voice rough with concern and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. "Like I finally know who I'm supposed to be," she said. The settlement around them was transforming as representatives from dozens of communities arrived to meet the bridgewalker who had awakened the ancient network. But for the moment, none of that mattered as much as the way Darius was looking at her, not as a prophesied figure or a powerful hybrid, but as a woman he'd somehow learned to love in the space of a single day. "The elders are going to want to talk to you," he said. "All of them, from every community. There will be councils and negotiations and probably a dozen different factions trying to claim you for their own political purposes." "And what do you want?" she asked. His golden eyes met hers, and she saw her own feelings reflected there. "I want to build something new with you, not because of prophecies or bloodlines or political necessity, but because of this." He gestured to the space between them, to the connection that had nothing to do with supernatural abilities and everything to do with two people recognizing something essential in each other. Around them, the settlement buzzed with activity as the new alliance began to take shape. Representatives from communities that hadn't spoken in decades worked together to plan coordinated defenses. Ancient grudges were set aside in favor of practical cooperation. The isolation that had made them all vulnerable was ending, replaced by something stronger and more hopeful. But in the bell tower, two people stood apart from the larger changes, focused on the smaller but equally important transformation happening between them. "I don't remember my past," Evelyn said quietly. "I don't know who I was before today, what kind of life I lived, whether there are people out there wondering what happened to me." "Does it matter?" Darius asked. She considered the question seriously. The woman who had awakened in the forest that morning felt like a stranger now. Her memories, if they ever returned, would be from a different life entirely. The person she was becoming, the bridge walker who could unite communities and coordinate supernatural defenses, was someone new. "No," she said finally, "it doesn't matter. This is who I am now. This is who I choose to be." As if summoned by her words, Lyra appeared at the top of the tower stairs, her ancient face glowing with satisfaction and something that might have been maternal pride. "The other elders want to meet with you," she said. "They're calling it the first council in 3 centuries. There's talk of formal alliances, shared territories, coordinated responses to future threats." "How long do I have?" Evelyn asked. "They're gathering now, but..." The elder's expression softened slightly. "They can wait until morning. You've done enough for one day." As Lyra disappeared back down the stairs, Evelyn turned to look out over the settlement. The sounds of celebration were beginning to replace the sounds of battle, as communities that had been strangers hours ago shared food and stories around hastily built fires. Children who had never seen anything beyond their own territories played with cubs from distant packs. Ancient barriers were dissolving in real time. "I suppose this makes me technically responsible for all of this," she said, gesturing at the scene below. "We're responsible for it," Darius corrected. "All of us together. That's what makes it work." She looked at him, at the man who had been her captor and protector and anchor, all in the space of a single day, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. Whatever came next, the politics and negotiations and inevitable challenges of building something unprecedented, they would face it together. The bridge walker had awakened, the ancient network was active again, and the scattered supernatural communities of the mountains were united for the first time in centuries. But more than that, Evelyn had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. A place where she belonged completely, and a person who saw all of her. The powerful hybrid, the lost woman with no memories, the bridge between worlds, and loved every part of what he found. As the stars appeared overhead and the celebration continued below, she made her choice about the future. Not just for the alliance or the communities or the grand destiny everyone seemed so eager to discuss, but for herself. She was home.